Welcome everyone to the Ontology Summit 2022. Today is March 2nd, 2022, and this is the beginning of the second track of the Ontology Summit. This track is devoted specifically to pandemics, and we have a very strong collection of speakers who will be in this track. So today we're pleased to have Asiyah Yu Lin, who is going to be speaking on a post-workshop report, workshop on COVID-19 ontologies. Then next week, Michael DeBellis and Viswanath Dutta will be talking about uses of semantic web technology to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Then after that, on March 16th, John Beverly will be speaking on the subtle art of modeling pandemics. And then on March 23rd, Alpha Tom Kodamalil will be speaking on the COVID-19 multilingual ontologies. This track will end on March 30th. We're going to have a couple of small presentations, very short presentations to kind of set the scene, set the track. Matthew West talking about disasters as information management failures. And then Maria Eftemovic-Ardir speaking on extracting knowledge from the pandemic literature, specifically actually from COVID-19 literature. And after those, we're going to have an open discussion leading to a synthesis of the pandemics track. So today, we're going to be hearing from Asiyah Yu Lin, who has an interdisciplinary background in a wide variety of fields: medicine, immunology, molecular biology, medical informatics, and even entrepreneurship. So I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting things that she'll be telling us today. She's a knowledgeable ontologist with expertise in artificial intelligence, semantic technologies, and much more. Advocates the leveraging of ontologies for interoperability and establishing an ecosystem. She initiated and manages the OHDSI Medical Device Working Group, the COVID-19 Ontology Harmonization Group, and the FDA NIH Ontology Roundtable Discussion Group. She's currently with the NIH's Data and Technology Advancement National Service Scholar Program, and she coordinates NIH internal and external stakeholders. In the slide there, I have a link to more information about Asiyah. So now, Asiyah, would you like to share the screen?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. Let me just, and I'm happy to see a lot of people that I work with will give the presentation. And I think my presentation just give a very good intro, like to start for the whole track. One sec. Okay, I'm sharing. I see. Slideshow.
Yes, we can see your shared screen.
Yeah, I need to switch. Okay, so this is a post-workshop report of the 2020 workshop on ontology, COVID-19 ontologies that I organized with a couple of my colleagues when I was working at the FDA when the pandemic just started. And we had a lot of interesting talks. I will give an overview of the workshop and then go through each session and highlight some talks. And then I also will mention some activities afterwards. For example, the COVID-19 harmonization or the COVID-19 epidemiological ontology harmonization work and other productions by other people. So this workshop was held in by 2 days on October 23rd, October 30th in 2020. And we have a GitHub established there, and we have about 60% people attended and very actively attended from all over the world, so including Europe, North America, Asia, and Saudi Arabia. And we have day one, day two. So day one, we're talking about the ontologies, like existing, how people extending existing ontologies for COVID-19 or newly developed ontologies specifically for COVID-19, and then the COVID-19 ontology resources. Day two, we're talking about the data standardization and some use cases for drug analysis and knowledge and NLP and some tools. So I will mainly talking about the drug analysis, and then I will talk about the COVID-19 ontology harmonization work that I presented to the ICBO 2021. So there are GitHub, you can find all the talks, post the PDFs, slides, and also all the videos are available at the Biomedical Ontology World YouTube channel. So we also invited some keynote speakers. Warren Kibbe, he talked about N3C. At that time, N3C just established for about more than a half years. They had a lot of activities going on. And Dr. Gregory Pappas, he was working at CBER FDA for this SHIELD project. But now he is detailing at the ONC. Yeah, by the way, I will also talk about some harmonization and collaboration work around this SHIELD, which is mainly dealing with diagnostic testing data. And then Miles Exton, at the time, he was the advanced genetics editor-in-chief. He's now senior advisor at NuminusMind.com, the drug company. So he talked about the FAIR moleculars for COVID-19 research. The first day, we had the Yuki Yamagata from Riken, Japan, talking about the homeostasis imbalance process ontology for COVID-19 related infectious process. So this ontology mainly focusing on the molecular level process all the way up to the human organism level processes. And they are built in a relevantly isolated way. They're using a little gene ontology processes, biological processes, but they have a lot of processes, and they have user interface and application in their website in Riken. And then I was talking about a little research on, at that time, we have a couple of COVID-19 vaccines and the clinical trials information. So how to give a better information for the publics by looking at the data from. So I was using the vaccine ontology and the clinical trial ontology. And another group from Jackson's lab, they developed a medical action ontology for COVID-19 treatment. So the terms included in this Maxo are the procedure terms that I don't know if they are mapping to the current CPT codes or not, or what, but I think was mainly focused on COVID-19 treatment procedure terms. And then next session was a lot of newly emerged COVID-19 ontologies. For example, COBOK, which is ontology to support literature by the EBI, and then the GoFair group developed a semantic data model for the WHO's COVID-19 case report form. CODO is the ontology that will be presented for the next session. The group are from India. And then Idle COVID-19 is by John Beverly and Barry Smith, and by John will be invited to talk in this track as well. So the CIDO is developed by Oliver He and many other people. I'm also involved. By the way, I was Oliver He's postdoc, so a lot of his, I still participate in his activities. All right, and then next we're also talking about data integration that is mainly featuring the diagnostic testing and epidemiological data. So in this too, we had data harmonizer talk from talking about the harmonizing SARS-CoV-2 contextual data from Canada. Is a group from Canada, and they're Rihanna, she's on call today. And then there is another group which composed by a lot of people. I'm involved. There is a nonprofit organization, Veritas, DX are involved, and the Mark Salad, he's in Stanford. He has coronavirus standard working group. So this group working towards to define the minimal information standards about the virtual viral controls. And then in the keynote, we also talked about the shield. So the shield is the HHS level collaborative AHRQ fund. I think AHRQ funded. I don't know who funded, but it's HHS level in collaborations for defining interoperabilities with the public health laboratory data and use it for real world evidence. So Dr. Papas talked about it. It was all these are very valuable talks that I encourage you to go to check out the videos if you have time. So now I want to focus on the using ontologies for the drug analysis, basically the repurposing drug analysis. So I have 3 groups to present. One is an FDA group who will present using AI-powered method for drug repurposing. They mainly use network-based omics method. And then Chris Mungo's group who developed a knowledge graph for COVID-19, and they were able to apply an embedding method to find candidate drugs that can be repurposed. And then another group in the cost, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi, they using the ontology-based ML method to predict the drugs, and they also use the clinical trial information. So to give you a little bit detailed for this FDA group is using a lot of network-based analysis, a lot of data from public domains, omics, and eventually their predicted drugs will be experimentally validated by the NCAT. So their take-home messages is that the public available ontologies and biological data with AI allow them to systematically survey the marketed drugs for their potential to treat COVID-19, and they mainly use again, network analysis. And they have a machine learning specific method for the network analysis. And they found 24 repositioning candidate, and they were using it for testing in vitro assays. And then for the knowledge graph approach is that they use the semantic labeled property graph rather than the RDF or OWL format, so that they can really serialized as a big knowledge graph and using BioLink data model to connect all those data in one big graph, and they using embeddings to ranking those drug candidates. So the take home for this group is that they feel knowledge graph is better than used for machine learning and embedding than the ontology itself. And the knowledge graph, they use knowledge graph to rank candidate drugs. And also they advocate that we have to use unified effort to build those knowledge graphs. And more information you can find on either this presentation or you can search their information online. And another group that is in Saudi, led by Dr. Robert Hondolf, his group has been spearheading the ontology-based machine learning methods for maybe more than 5 years. And in this talk, they just use the COVID-19 ontology CITO and their specific method called OPA2-BAC to identify the candidate drugs based on the protein target similarity. So this is their workflow. First, they're getting the vector embeddings for the proteins and using OPA2-BAC and using CITO data. And then they calculate the similarities of the protein target of all the COVID-19 drugs. And then they identify the candidate drugs by the predict the protein targets using the drug bank data. So they proposed those list of the candidate drugs, and there more work need to be done. So then we also have a session on the NLP. So the Health Canada, they presented their tool for called Dark Matter, it's a Health Canada solution for information retrieval. And Brian Alper, he presented COCA work. So from that, I actually attend the COCA's calls. I found their work is very interesting. Actually, can be used for epidemiological studies when we want to do a lot of integrated meta-analysis and assessing the bias of the epidemiological study. And then Hongfang Liu from Mayo, she presented how she standardized COVID-19 clinical trials, of course, using, she also used CITO ontology by collaborating with Oliver He and some other terminologies, which is, you can find her work from the N3C working group. So we have also other sessions like regarding to the resource. Enric Wolf from Spain talked about the ontology resources for librarians, and we have a couple of tools presented there. So Victor Lee presented a suite of tools that presented using the value set based approach to author ontologies, and OntoloBridge is a tool that is an API based tool to help people to submit terms and get feedbacks from the end users. And then the collaborative drug discovery, they have been developing a tool called bioharmony annotator to also using some machine learning capacities to annotate the bioassays for their company. So then after the workshop, we did a couple of ontology harmonizations, and then we also formed some kind of collaborations. So I'm sorry for this. So I want to talk about the harmonization work for the ontology. Wait, let me go. For the ontology, COVID-19 ontology harmonization. And then, so we identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 ontologies from the WCO 2020 workshop. And then we also identified the people who are working on those ontologies. So CITO, VITO, COVID-19 IDO, they are all belongs to one group. They all follows Buffalo strategy, and they are all in the OVO community. And in fact, they are all belongs to a bigger group of infectious disease. So after the call, the John Beverly decided, okay, let's just merge my ontology into CITO. And then the co-book ontology, it's more like application ontology rather than a reference ontology. So their developers also decided we are not going to create new terms and new IDs for those terms. We're going to just submit our new terms to CITO if CITO doesn't have it. So they actually become an application ontology using CITO terms. So it's a collaboration of users and the reference ontology developers. So HOIP, homostatus imbalance process ontology, is, I think they're running out of their funding. And Yuki Yamagata, who is a main developer, she's in the process of mapping those processes to gene ontology process so that she can kind of interoperate or align with CITO. She also mapped to CITO. So this lab led by Hiroshi Masuya is a long-term participant for the OBO Found or ICBO conferences. It's just they're located in Japan and sometimes a little bit difficult to coordinate. And then Maxto, since it's more on medical procedures, so they are kind of standalone, but they can bring it into the whole picture of COVID-19 ontology. And the Kodo, as I said, it's a very different one in developed in India, and we can hear more updates from them next week. So I can see more development and see if we can harmonize. So by this work, the harmonization processes is motivated by we should, as an ontology community, we should produce as little ontology as possible for the end users. We first analyze ontology we have generated a big table to see the differences, commonalities of their terms used, and then we use align with buffer or not as a criteria. And then another criteria is, does those ontology use OBO ontologies? And then we have some calls within within the participants and also teamwork. So eventually we merged harmonization, harmonizable ontologies. So this is a result by harmonizing them. Vital, CITO, IDO, COVID-19, they are now can be harbored in the CITO. So that is what I meant. CITO and IDO COVID-19 merged. Vital is an intermediate ontology that CITO, IDO COVID-19 is using. Because both of them are extensions of infectious disease ontology. So it's very easy to just put them together. And then COVOC, as I said before, COVID, they said, okay, we're not going to develop any new terms. We'll just reuse CITO terms and send our new term request to CITO. And then HOIP, I said they are doing mappings. So if you see this buffer structure, HOIP can be just a mapping under buffer's processes to keep a branch that kind of harmonized by buffer. And the medical Maxo is another branch that is more dealing with healthcare processes. So Kodo that we'll present next week, last time I heard is that their version 2 is going to align to buffer. So when they align to buffer, it will be easy to harmonize with us with this big picture. So another achievement is that we build a collaborative community that aims to harmonize ontology for COVID-19, harmonize the COVID-19 ontologies. I think the collaborative community is more important than the product because we can then collaborate more to harmonize more. So by this exercise, I actually concluded that we have 3 tiers of harmonization. So the first tier is the best, that is merge harmonizable ontologies. This requires some individual ontology developers give them up their own IDs in the case of Covoke and idle COVID-19. And then others is like building the buffer conformed or aligned ontologies such as CODO and the HOIP cases. This one requires the developers agree with buffer structure. Some ontologies do not agree buffer structure. Therefore, we move to the tier 3 that is building interoperable ontologies that is for non-buffer and buffer-based ontologies. I think basically it's more like mapping terms. I think it's lowest level of harmonization, and but it is a more popular choice because everybody has their own use cases and their own needs that, and also they may not agree with buffer approach. So I think the knowledge graph now is rising. I have a question mark here, and maybe the knowledge graph will help more interoperable ontologies, but I'm not so sure. So I keep observing. And then another harmonizing opportunities activities is epidemiological ontologies. One is the CMO, another is Gene Epio. I think you did invite one of them to present in the track. I don't remember, but our mini hackathon is scheduled in March 15th. If anybody from this call are interested, please let me know. I think we will. There are a lot of data related terms in this too. So CODO is in the consideration, but Michael told me that including him into the call, he may join us. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to their talk next week. So we will basically use a lot of OB's data-related modeling strategy to see if it's possibly harmonizable for these two ontologies. And then I want to talk about the diagnostic testing collaborations. So currently we have the APHL Association of Public Health Laboratories and the Adver Test DX. This company is a very interesting company. They are actually emerged as a volunteer group when COVID just started, and they manually or semi-automatically parsed the FDA EUA testing PDF files, and they generate a big table to collect all the data elements related with the EUA testing. And then myself, I had some work on based on a CIDO to modeling those diagnostic testing. Same goal, all three of us, we all using the FDA EUA information. And then the SHIELD project, they produce the liver table, which a lot of data elements has been extracted by the Adver DX big table on their website. So currently these three parties are discussing how to collaborate because the CDC, the liver table, I might typed it wrong. Oh yeah, it's correct. So the liver table is for each EUA testing mapped to the LOIN codes, SNOMED code, and point out which tests are using what technology from what manufacturer. And I recently heard that CDC requires more data elements, including what testing is, the home testing kit or other kind of information that is important for this project. So the goals for this collaboration is more for how do we build a pipeline to automatically extract information from the FDA EUA website, and then how do we harmonize the data related with those EUA testings. And the other outcomes will be is that Eric Wolf, he published a book chapter talking about the features and limitations of ontology for coronavirus data management in libraries. In his chapter, he talked a lot. He looked at a lot of ontologies, COVID-19 ontologies that are covered by the workshop, and gave some his analysis. And then Health Canada, through their work, I introduced them to the FDA to talk about how they build ontologies or using ontologies and how they build their NLP pipelines, because within FDA there is a similar group. It's just maybe different topic. FDA's group is doing things with tobacco products, and the Health Canada is more focusing on drugs. And then we also, with Oliver, his lab, we also developed COVID-19 vaccine knowledge base. So this is a link and a paper you can check out. And the other things related is that the University of Miami and the CDD, they then had another workshop to just focusing on tools. How do we use different tools to synthesize biomedical ontologies? So information is here. Their videos are also on the biomedical ontology YouTube channel, and their all the videos or PDFs are on their GitHub. And then I want to just mention the FDA NIH Ontology Roundtable Group, which is which already existed before this workshop, but currently we are exploring the opportunities for ontologies to be included in the FDA data standard catalog. So giving you some final thoughts for many years of work with ontologies and the interaction with the end users, I think, first of all, the NIH fundings toward ontology development is actually very limited. I currently conducting the NIH ontology investment portfolio analysis, so I hope I can report back to the community by the end of the year. And then I think it's time to get commercial partners involved. And as a matter of fact, there is a side bite and the post-TOIA Alliance, they are working on ontologies a lot. And the pharma companies, they have their internal ontologies or to build inside their information system to just try to mapping different entities and finding documents that they need from connecting different departments. And then second is that ontologies should continue building ontology. Ontologists should continue building ontologies to connect data in a meaningful way, because it will be used. It will certainly be used when everybody started connecting their siloed data. And then we have to build a FIRE ontologies. FIRE stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable ontologies. And as ontologies, we have to keep in mind that we need to harmonize ontologies as much as possible. And in my mind, less ontology is better. We should advocate ontology as a data asset in an organization. I think a lot of organizations is aware of this due to their data challenges. And then another thought is that because of the end user always ask me, is there an ontology ready to use? But I found out that my answer will be, after all these years, that never an ontology will be ready to use off the shelf. The users of ontology always have to customize the public ontologies for their own use cases. So from here, I really encourage a lot of collaborative development between the academical ontologies and the commercial or government ontology users. So that's all my talk, and I thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. It's a privilege for me, and my contact information is here. I welcome you to send in your questions, or you see opportunities to collaborate. I'm happy to connect you with other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Asiyah. That was a most enlightening talk. So now we have two hands raised. So I think the first hand is Rhiannon. Could you unmute and ask your question?
Sorry, there's a conversation going in the background. I was actually clapping. I wasn't raising my hand. Sorry.
Oh, you're clapping.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have Leah.
Hello, and Dr. Lin, thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed hearing your summary and wrap up of all of those different sessions. I had a question. You mentioned earlier in your presentation the benefit of using semantic labeled property graphs. I was wondering, kind of from a more technical standpoint, what language is being used to develop those semantic labeled property graphs? What type of platforms, if you're aware, were used to use semantic property graphs in that example? And I mean, to any extent, you could kind of dig a little deeper into that. I'm intrigued because it's something in a completely different realm I'm trying to work on with my colleagues, and would be happy to hear kind of trying to navigate between using your traditional ontology for thinking about analysis for analysis purposes, and then how do you carry things over to a semantic label property graph like perspective, and like kind of how to navigate between those. I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much, Leah. That is Chris Mongo's work. So in his work, he's using the BioLink as a data model language, which is new, and his group is actively developing it. And I have seen a lot of people using different tools for generating those knowledge graph. One of the tool is Neo4j. Another tool is TopBread, has some capacity. I think they have a tool for a knowledge graph. So probably property knowledge graphical database. That will be the keyword for you to search. And a lot of work. So actually the RDF is also a graph database. It's just RDF is triples that all connected together, but the graph database, property graph is different with ontology, is that you can define properties as you like. But then it's good to follow the ontologies, because you will see how different properties how different entities should connect with each other. But then ontologies follows very sometimes rigid formatting of connecting things together. They have defined the properties domain and the
Range.
Yeah, domain and range. So you do not use those properties as freely as in a property database, top property graphical database. That would be, so Neo4j or BioLink, you can check. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So Gary has his hand up. Gary?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So I wanted to follow up a little bit on the semantic harmonization aspect of the work. I am actually involved, I'm a co-lead on the Earth Science Information Partners semantic harmonization effort, ESIP in short, and did present a little bit of that last year. What I'm wondering, if you have examples between, say, two of the ontologies or the vocabularies of what was involved in your harmonization to make these the tier one aspect.
Yeah. So as I showed in my slides, that what is involved. First, we compare all the ontologies and to see what do they use the buffer as their top level ontology. That is a very important criteria for us to merge the ontologies. Second is how they reuse other ontologies. So if they have more reused ontology terms from all foundry ontologies, then they have better chance to merge. And the third is more like the awareness of the developers. So when we organize those meetings, ontology especially biomedical ontology world is a very small world, and people come to join the conference each year, like ICBO conference, for more than 10 years. So when we organize and when we talk to other people who develop the new COVID-19 ontologies, they do come together and say, yes, we will do a harmonized one ontology. There is an exception for Alpha, who will present for her COVID-19 multi-language ontology. I actually work with her for clinical trial ontology, including Oliver. He also worked with her for clinical trial ontology. So when we invited her, she was in the process of make her paper published. So she didn't join us, but I'm sure she had told me that she reuses a lot of ontology obocidal terms. So I'm sure that their ontology is also more harmonizable. So that is for the tier 1. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had an example. The type of things I was thinking of that we ran into in harmonizing cryosphere vocabularies, there are dozens of them. And so we had a person who took all the definitions and tried to find the commonalities. The definitions would have things like, what is the process that created an entity? What are the subtypes? What are the supertypes? What is it? What are the constituents? What are the roles in processes? Things of that nature. And we discovered, even with OBO foundry ontologies like ENVO, environmental ontology, and others dealing with earth sciences, that the hierarchies were inconsistent, but we could make them locally, regionally consistent. It was a fair effort, but it was very interesting in the process. And of course, there were different vocabularies, slightly different vocabularies in each of them. And so we used things like SCOS, at least at the vocabulary level, to say how they're related in a linguistic sense. That's the type of thing I was thinking of.
Yes. So ENVO is a very important ontology for the OBO foundry, but they are not restricted following the buffer structure. And then I think in your case, you might not have all the ontology mapping to the buffer. That's why it's difficult. And I feel like you are more a tier 3 currently, and then try to, if the developers of the ontologies, they are not maintaining their IDs, you can certainly just reuse them and then make some changes according to your use case. That's why I have a final thought. The last point is there's never an ontology ready to use off the shelf for your use case. You always need to work with a lot of public ontologies for specifically and customized specifically for your use case. So this brings up 2 questions. One is that the OBO foundry community needs to be more well organized and to produce better reference ontology, more buffer aligned. And buffer is also, although it has been developed for, I don't know, maybe more than 20 years, it is still new. So a lot of ontologies are struggling to map into buffer and then evolving their own solutions. So in overall, the OBO foundry ontologies are not product level. It's still in the development level. So there will be a lot of work needs to be done if we want to use the OBO foundry ontologies. So I really encourage, if you are using specific ontologies that you see they're not fitting your use case, then you can go to their GitHub to send the issue request, and then they can try to fix your problems. And then another thing is that why I'm conducting this portfolio research, portfolio analysis for NIH investment to the ontologies is just want to see how we can get some fundings to make the OBO foundry community more organized and produce better quality ontology to the bigger world. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of efforts now to put on the data, the biodata, a lot of initiatives, a lot of money goes that direction. But ontologies, it's a little bit neglected. But I think each organization, like pharma companies, they are investing money into their own organizational level internal ontologies for their own use. You're muted, Gary.
Well, thank you very much. I see that Ravi had his hand up. I didn't want to, I wanted to give him a chance to have a question. We can follow up, by the way.
Sure, thank you.
Go ahead, Ravi.
Yes. Can you hear me, Ken?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, Gary, if you have more questions, it's a very interesting topic because without integration and harmonization, all we have are silos. And people need to talk, collaborate, and use each other's knowledge. So Asiyah, very, very good presentation. A lot of your energy is in bringing people together and in bringing ontologies together. And you did mention a couple of tools that have existed in time, like TopBraid and
Neo4j.
Neo4j. And do you think these tools are also progressing in tune with the tremendous progress of lot of artifacts or data available in the COVID-19 scenario? Do you think these tools are evolving as much as the techniques of knowledge graphs and other items? But the most interesting part is what Gary asked you, namely, what is the standard technique by which we can harmonize these different ontologies? And your tier 1 to 3 were very, very enlightening. So my questions are more in the light of usage. How far are we in operationally using all your great works and works of NIH, FDC, etc.? So when will the industry or public at large start using them operationally? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is actually a very big and difficult question for me to answer. I cannot say when and how, but from my experience, a lot of people like TopBraid, which can work nicely with the ontologies data as well as graph, other property graph data, and Neo4j has evolved a lot. So they are really spearheading the property graph database, and they have tools to use machine learning for the graph data science. I am currently looking at, I installed Neo4j on my desktop, but then they are for loading into ontology, you have to have a specific plugin, but they're really developing very rapidly. I think I see more progressing of knowledge graph using than the ontology itself. But then knowledge graph, usually to build a knowledge graph, you really need the guidance from the ontology. So yeah. I mean, this is a great place to look at those, and another place to look at the pharma company. They are using their ontologies and the graph database for their operation already. So their Postoya Alliance is a place where you can really learn the experience of how pharma company use ontologies or knowledge graph in their operations. Today, I just attended a call. Pfizer showed how they use ontology and SciBite and different tools to name their compound entities, and how mapping different alias names for their compounds and building a search interface to search all the documents within their Pfizer and to be shared across different departments, because our R&D or regulatory, it's a siloed system. Those are the Pastoia Alliance is a good place to see pharma's real use for ontologies.
Very good. Thank you so much. So we are inching towards operational use by interested parties and pharma companies, as well as clinical. Any comments on clinical usages? And you did talk a lot about drugs and testing and development, but I was just wondering on clinical side.
Yeah, I can give you a contact for clinical side who is developing ontologies for clinical use. Yeah. Very
good. And I mean, I'm looking for the day when NLM and these libraries will integrate, and their knowledge bases would integrate with these ontologies. That would be a good test. Yeah. I think that is, they're currently a little bit separated, but we can make things happen. Yeah. Thank you. And Gary has more questions.
Robert had his hand up before,
Robert.
so maybe he, yeah.
Robert had his hand up. Robert?
Sure. For just to speak generally and for the audience in which there may be folks who are specialists in these is good for that particular community, but it shouldn't be construed universally as one is better than the other, because each project will have its own requirements, its own needs. So some, as pointed out in the presentation, some will prefer mappings, some will not, some will prefer not to use a so-called upper ontology. And that's an important point, because there are both technical and ethical reasons not to use upper ontologies. And so it's important that whenever you're doing a harmonization effort, you basically outline exactly what the steps you're doing and how you define harmonization, because there's a difference between subsuming a vocabulary or an ontology under another, as opposed to mappings. In the former situation, it basically you're subordinating your model to another, and so that is drastically different than doing a mapping in which is actually more balanced, and that sort of thing. So you don't want to run the risk of having any single ontology monopolize either an entire community or otherwise. And in addition, there are also complexities when it comes to the perception of these things. So it's not simply about terms in the sense of words. If you're using more abstract models, there's actually an ideological component where you get into very abstract theories. And so you don't want to simply blindly adopt a model that makes such assumptions or worldviews. And so there's various aspects to consider in these activities. Yeah, over.
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, my use case, I think using a top ontology has to be based on community-based, consensus-based. If everybody agrees that we want to use a top-level ontology, then why not? But if you don't, then as you said, Robert, then people has to define what do they mean by harmonization. So as what I hear from you, I'm thinking that the ontology harmonization is more use case driven. So you have to have a use case, and then you do harmonization. And I know that you all last year produced a paper on ontology harmonization, a white paper. I'm thinking maybe we can all work together to have a paper written and submitted to the Journal for Biomedical Semantics to just talk about the data harmonization approaches or solutions.
This is Gary. Yes, the ESA cluster that I mentioned, which I'm a co-lead on, is working on a paper on harmonization experience. Go slowly because we're a volunteer group and we only meet like once a month for a little bit of time, but that is in the works. I was also going to make a comment on methodology, as I think that the old knowledge engineering, ontological engineering techniques of 20 years ago are evolving in the face of a number of things, not only knowledge graphs, but also trying to become more modular. But 2 weeks ago, we had a talk from Mark Fox, who talked about an approach that I've seen before from other people, which is several levels, so that you have this top level where you have it's just the idea of you have a process and so forth, a very general thing, and then below that you have a more domain specific thing which connects to it. But here where you have things like disease processes, and then so that's a sort of a middle level here, and he spoke in particular about a public health lower level, where he would talk about very specific things such as its effect on transportation and other things like that. So at least a 3-level process was sort of a little bit like a tree, because as you go from the top towards the bottom, you have all the branches. And in a sense, you have a little bit more of a modular approach that plugs in, and therefore it can be more interoperable because people can use some of the things at one level and plug into it.
Yes. I think he called it like layered, some layered technique. Yeah, and there are talks about modularizing ontologies as well in the OBO Foundry, OBO community. I certainly will connect with you, Gary. On all these topics. Yeah.
Wonderful. Asiyah, I see Biswanath Datta in the audience. Does he have any questions? Dr. Datta?
No, thanks.
All right. We had a very interesting talk today from Asiyah and very relevant to the topic. Ram, you might have as chair of this champion of this track some comments.
Rob, are you still there?
Was there
I'm under mute, so I'm okay now. Yeah. So yeah, and Aisha, that was a very interesting summary of the workshop, and I think there needs to be some follow up on this thing, which you have heard from many of the audience members here. So let's see how this works, because one of the major concerns in all these things is when we have these workshops, people come and then they give talks about the ontologies that they've developed. And I think one of the questions which I believe Ravi raised is that where is this actually being used, and what's the impact of things that have been developed? And I hope that we'll see some of this in the future. I know you have been working on some of those efforts, but the reality of the situation is unless someone kind of uses this and shows some impact, these things will be going on from a theoretical stage. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two.
I want to advertise for the ISOBO meeting that we are organizing for this year in September in Michigan and Ann Arbor. I'm wondering if you guys want to organize one. I think our theme is for the use of ontology. We want to emphasize the use of ontology. So I inviting you to submit like a workshop proposal. I think it's due May or due April. So you can have a collaborative effort to bring all the people together. And this conference is also joint with the US2TS, United States and the Semantic Web Technology Summit in East Lansing. So we call it Michigan Week of Ontologies and Semantic Web. So let me know.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So maybe we can send a link to Ken and
Yeah.
we'll put it up in the workshop
Yeah, I
the
will.
page. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be posting everything on the meeting page. And
That actually is coming up very quickly, like March 9th in
Oh,
Michigan.
I think, no, it's not March 9th. US2
Okay, has it
TSA
moved?
Yeah, they changed the date to the September, end of September. So they're going to call, we will have a whole week from Sunday to Saturday. First 3 days will be ICBO meeting, and the last 3 days will be the US2 TS meeting. So I will keep you all informed. Yeah.
Great. And the second thing is you mentioned the top level ontologies in a way, and then you mentioned BFO. Now, in terms of validation of BFO, what is the progress on that?
I don't know. This is a good question to ask Barry. Yeah.
No, within your community, within the community you talked about, people who have come to the workshop and things like that. Any feelings on that? From the people
No.
who have used
Yeah,
BFO?
I think all the Foundry ontologies are kind of validating the BAFO, but since a lot of people just chose BAFO, I think it has a convincing, like it is convincing that some people we didn't advertise, but they still just chose BAFO. Like for example, FDA group, I didn't know that they like BAFO. So
okay, good enough. Thank you.
Well, frankly, BAFO was the only one available, so they had no choice.
But there are others.
Dolce was available.
Yeah, there are many others. Yeah, in the Europe.
Historically, I was saying they were one of the early ones to come out with a TLO, so everybody went on top level. But I think if we were to start today, we would do a much better definition of top level ontologies and integration as compared to use of BFO by default.
Yes, so this is an important topic also to prevent misleading the audience and others, because there's a lot of politics that go into it. So it's not simply people liking an ontology. Often it's because there are other forces at play in which there's vested interests, in which there are supporters of a given ontology in a community, which causes them to effectively convince the non-expert to use the given upper ontology when they're not aware of the others. So
yes.
There should not be a default or monopolization by any single ontology, and the audience should very much know that they can create their own upper ontology. They should also be aware that they do not need an upper ontology. There are both ethical and technical reasons not to use them. And so we should avoid misleading any audience with regards to thinking they have to default or use one or the other, and also making the audience aware of the entire global field for fairness to all of the ontologies is important.
Yeah, that's why I said we need to develop fair ontology. And then I can give you an example of why I chose BAFO for my favorite top level ontology. I think the BAFO is more suitable for the thinking of biomedical experiment and data aspect. When I was doing my PhD work, I have to build a database for genetic susceptibility factors for type 2 diabetes. And then I'm thinking the data model, and I read the paper about using ontology for immunology database. I said, okay, let me look at the ontology. At the time, I look at all the top level ontologies. I don't know why I need to think about it, but when I think about how do I differentiate those things, because there are study involved, there are genetic factors involved, there are disease involved. So I have to find something to give me a framework to think downwards. So I look at the SUMO, I look at another one, what is the name? By Italy. And then I look at the BAFO, and then I chose BAFO. Yeah.
How about genetic ontology? Yeah,
so now there are like a BioTop, which is more BAFO and non-BAFO combined as a top level ontology. And there are another one. So the the Euro BBI's ontology, they are not following, like EFO, they do not follow the Buffalo, and the Saudi group, they have their own top level ontology for all their ontologies. So yeah, I worked for both Buffalo ontology based ontology and the non-Buffalo based ontology. So I totally agree. It's a choice.
As is the choice not to use one or create one's own. Again, I need to emphasize that, that they're not strictly necessary.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Thank you so much, Asiyah. It's been very, very exciting session, and I'm very happy that our pandemic track opened with your talk, which gave us a very good overview on how different ontologies are interacting, how various bodies are contributing to the integration effort and harmonization effort. I want to give it back to Ken and Ram. If you have concluding remarks, my thanks are already given to Asiyah, expressed.
Yeah, I thank you for inviting me. And I'm really looking forward for your whole track for the next talks.
Please join us next week, and exciting talk from Michael DeBellis and Vishwanath Datta. And please post any links or new conferences that you have on the subject in our forum, so we can, some of those who are interested can follow them. Gary, Gary or Ken, anybody? Ram?
No, I have nothing to say, so I just have to go to another meeting right now. So I'm going to switch off. Okay, log off. Thank you.
Ken? Otherwise we can call, we can say so long. And Ken, are you there? If not, I'm finally thanking and saying our session is over, and we thank Asiyah for great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you, Kas.
All right.